Today we will be using arrays to help us with distributive property. The distributive property states that A times B plus C equals A times B plus A times C. And you get that because anything outside the parentheses, like the A, is multiplied by whatever's inside individually. And because there's a plus sign in between the B and the C, there's a plus sign in between the A times B and A times C. They're multiplying because the A is multiplying by whatever's in the parentheses. When using an array to help you with distributive property, you say you have a number 16 times 7. And that might be a little bit difficult for you to do. So what you could do is make an array. It's a blocked figure which can be separated into parts, like this. So then you separate the numbers 16 and 7 to make them easier to multiply. You could do 10 plus 6, because that equals 16, and you could do 5 plus 2, because that equals 7. You then multiply these numbers together to get this block, which would be 50, and then you multiply the 10 again with the 2 to get down in this block to be 20, the 6 with the 5 to be 30, and the 6 with the 2 to be 12. Now that you have all of that sorted, you can break it down and use it for your distributive property. You have your 16 times 7 to start, and then you separate it down. So the 16 becomes 10 plus 6 times 5 plus 2. And then you use your distributive property. The 10 times the 5 and the 10 times the 2, just like you did in your array, and the 6 times the 5 and the 6 times the 2, like in your array. And you already have your numbers, but first you have to do the 10 times 5 plus your 6 times 5 plus the 10 times 2, and then you use your 6 times 2. And you already have your numbers that you got from your array, so the 10 times 5 is 50, plus the 6 times 5, that's 30, and the 10 times 2, that's 20, and the 6 plus 2, that's 12. And then you just add them all together to equal 112. Let's try another one. Let's say we have a 22 times 5. Now that one might not be too difficult, but you still could break it down to make it easier for yourself. Now, because the 5 is a small number, you don't necessarily have to break it down. So you could still use the array and the distributive property to break down the 22. You just do 20 plus 2 on that side, and then the 5 over here. And 5 times 20 is 100, and 5 times 2 is 10. So you do just like the one before. You start out 22 times 5, and then you break it down. So it's 20 plus 2 times 5. because you didn't change the 5. And distribute. So you have 20 times 5 plus 2 times 5, which you got your numbers in your array. So it's 100 plus 10. And your answer is 110 because all you have to do is add them together. The distributive property works because say you have a number of 10 times 6, and you can distribute it because if you break down the numbers, say you break it down to 5 plus 5 times 3 plus 3. This number that you broke it down to still equals the number you had originally. So if you distribute it, just to make things easier, it'll still come out to the same answer that you had. 5 times 3 is 15, and 5 times 3 is 15. And 5 times 3 is 15. Oops. And 5 times 3 is 15. And if you add them all together, this is 30 plus these two equals 30. And the answer still ends up being 60. You could have done this with any numbers that would have added up to 10 or added up to 6. You could have done 6 plus 4 times 5 plus 1. Anything. It still would have been the same answer if you distributed properly. And that's why it works. Because if you use numbers that add up to the original numbers, it will always end up being the same answer.